Imagine a reality where every time you stepped outside, you weren't sure you'd make it back alive. But for millions of Ukrainians, that's not imagination. It's their daily reality where missiles destroy cities, air raid sirens never stop, and families sleep in basements not knowing if their homes will survive the night or not. In 2025, Ukraine is a place where survival has replaced living because after 4 years of war with Russia, cities lie in ruins, roads and bridges are broken, and the economy is collapsing. Food, water, and power are never certain. Schools are destroyed, hospitals are attacked, and children are growing up with trauma instead of hope of a bright future. This is the harsh truth of Ukraine today, and in this story, we'll take you inside that reality when survival itself becomes a way of life. Danger stops feeling temporary because it becomes permanent. That is exactly what millions of Ukrainians live with every single day. Let's find out. Missile and drone attacks are no longer breaking news, they are routine. In August 2025 alone, at least 208 civilians were killed and 827 injured. The month before, the toll was even higher, as 307 were killed and more than 1,400 wounded. Most of these casualties occur near the front lines, but even cities like Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Odessa, far from the trenches, are hit again and again. No place feels safe. Every strike leaves behind more than rubble. It erases the possibility of normal life. Families spend nights in basements, children do homework under the dim light of bomb shelters, and parents teach their kids to recognize the difference between outgoing and incoming fire instead of bedtime stories. And then there are the sirens, which sound constant, piercing, and endless. They interrupt meals, work, school, even sleep. People live in a state of constant alert, never sure if the next alarm will bring silence or destruction. In Ukraine, insecurity is not an exception and has become the atmosphere in which everyone breathes. If missiles don't take lives, they often take homes. By 2025, nearly 10% of Ukraine's housing has been destroyed or severely damaged, about 2 million homes reduced to rubble or left unlivable. Behind every number is a family forced to rebuild their life with little more than broken walls and shattered windows. For some, there is no choice but to stay. Nearly 3 million Ukrainians still live in damaged homes, patching up holes with plastic sheets and surviving winters with no proper heating. Humanitarian agencies estimate that almost 7 million people urgently need shelter or basic life-saving aid. The war has also turned Ukraine's infrastructure into a constant target. Power plants and energy grids are struck again and again, plunging entire cities into darkness during freezing nights. Water pipelines break down, leaving families carrying buckets from makeshift wells. Heating systems fail when they are needed the most. A home is supposed to be a place of safety and warmth. But in Ukraine, many have become cold, fragile shells that barely protect against the elements, let alone against war. When people cannot even count on a roof over their head, the idea of normal life slips further out of reach. But war doesn't just destroy buildings, it destroys the basic systems that keep people alive. In Ukraine, food, water, and healthcare, which are the essentials of survival, are all under constant threat. Around 5 million Ukrainians are expected to face food shortages in 2025. For families trapped in occupied or heavily shelled areas, markets are empty, supply routes are cut, and even bread becomes a luxury. Parents often skip meals so their children can eat. What once was a fertile country known as the breadbasket of Europe now struggles to feed its own people. Water is just as scarce. 1 in 5 households has no reliable access to safe drinking water, a direct result of pipelines shattered by strikes and contaminated supplies. In some towns, collecting water means standing in long lines at distribution trucks, never knowing if they'll come again tomorrow. The healthcare crisis is equally devastating. More than 9 million people now need medical assistance. Hospitals have been attacked over 2,100 times since the war began, leaving wards in ruins and doctors working in basements. Shortages of medicine and equipment mean routine illnesses can turn deadly. Surgeons perform life-saving operations with limited power, often using generators. Beyond physical injuries, the trauma of amputations, burns, and shock is creating a wave of long-term medical needs that Ukraine's system cannot meet. For many, survival no longer depends only on avoiding bombs, it depends on whether food, clean water, or a doctor will still be there the next day. Even beyond the bombs, Ukraine is fighting the battle of economic survival. The war has shrunk its economy to a fraction of what it once was, leaving millions without steady work or income. In 2025, Ukraine's economy is expected to grow only 2 to 3%, which is far too little to make up for the damage of the past 4 years. The scale of destruction is overwhelming. More than $152 billion in direct losses have been recorded so far, with housing alone making up almost a third of it. Factories have shut down, farmland is covered with mines, and ports that once sent Ukrainian grain across the world are either blocked or under attack. Whole industries have collapsed, from big steel plants to small family shops, leaving the towns that depended on them in ruins. For ordinary people, this means lost jobs, higher prices, and growing debt. Inflation eats into every paycheck, forcing families to borrow just to afford food and heating. Many Ukrainians who fled abroad send money back home, but inside the country, millions depend on humanitarian aid to survive. The future looks equally difficult. Even if the war ended tomorrow, rebuilding such a damaged economy would take decades. Without foreign investment and steady international help, Ukraine risks being trapped in a cycle of poverty and dependence. For a nation already fighting for survival, financial collapse makes daily life even harder. The war is not only ruining the present of adults, but is stealing the future from children. In Ukraine, education has become one of the deepest casualties of conflict. Nearly 4,000 schools and universities have been damaged or destroyed since the invasion began. For many children, classrooms have been replaced by basements or online lessons, often interrupted by air raid sirens and power cuts. Even today, only about 75% of children have access to in-person learning, and much of that happens in bomb shelters rather than proper classrooms. Teachers give lessons in underground halls where students sit on cold benches instead of desks, clutching notebooks by flashlight. Childhood is supposed to be about curiosity and growth, but here it is shaped by fear and survival. The toll is not just educational but psychological. More than 2 million children face serious protection risks, from violence to family separation. An estimated 1.5 million are at risk of PTSD and depression. Their earliest memories are not of playgrounds but of explosions. These young lives represent Ukraine's future, yet war has left them with interrupted schooling, broken routines, and trauma that may last a lifetime. For them, growing up feels as uncertain as the war itself. For people living under Russian occupation, survival carries an extra kind of fear. It's not only about escaping missiles or finding food, it's about protecting identity. In many occupied areas, Ukrainian language, culture, and traditions are being erased. Reports say that more than 1.2 million Ukrainians have been forced to take Russian passports, often under threats of losing jobs, pensions, or even medical care. Schools are made to follow Russian textbooks, and speaking openly about Ukraine can put lives in danger. Human rights groups have recorded over 10,000 cases of kidnappings and unlawful detentions in these regions since 2022. Families disappear overnight, women face sexual violence, and anyone suspected of supporting Ukraine is silenced through fear, torture, or prison. Amnesty International and the UN have also found evidence of forced deportations, including children taken to Russia against their will. In towns where neighbors once came together for weddings and festivals, silence now hangs heavy, broken only by propaganda on loudspeakers and the footsteps of patrolling soldiers. For those trapped in these areas, the war is not only about bombs and guns, it's about losing who they are. Survival has become a struggle to protect identity, memory, and dignity in a place where simply being Ukrainian has turned into a danger. For those under Russian occupation, the war is not only about bombs, it is about losing identity itself. Families are torn apart, culture is erased, and simply being Ukrainian has become dangerous. But even beyond these occupied regions, the future of the entire country remains deeply unstable. The war has forced more than 6 million people to flee abroad and displace another 5 million inside Ukraine. As battles shift front lines, whole communities are left unsure whether they will remain under Ukrainian control or fall under Russian rule. For many families, life means waiting in limbo as they are unable to rebuild homes or plan for tomorrow. International aid, though still large, is beginning to show cracks. In 2024, Ukraine received nearly $43 billion from Western allies, but projections for 2025 point to shrinking support as global attention moves elsewhere and donor fatigue sets in. This threatens food distribution, medical supplies, and the fragile progress of reconstruction. And even if peace came tomorrow, rebuilding would take decades. The World Bank estimates that full recovery will cost more than $486 billion, far beyond Ukraine's current resources. With minefields, ruined cities, and collapsed industries, peace alone cannot solve the crisis. For millions of Ukrainians, uncertainty itself has become the new reality of life. Now the question is, how long can a nation endure when daily survival itself has become the only mission? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and I shall see you in the next one, folks.